Hey everyone, welcome to Foundintheflock. We have a great show today. My name's Addison, and I'm here with my friend Josh.
How's it going, everybody? Super excited today. We've got a great episode lined up for you. This is actually Talk Show 3. We've gotten to do this for the third week in a row. I've felt that this has been an absolute blessing. I know Addison has enjoyed this. I hope that we get to continue doing this for a long time. But again, we got a great show for you. We're going to run on some faith first, going about some trials, dipping through James, other kinds of verses of that nature. Then we're going to hit it with what's going on. Again, talking about what's going on in our life and relating that to Scripture, talking about our walks in faith with the Lord. Going to go back to podcast pondering, hit on our last podcast with Harrison, and then we're going to wrap it up with Did You Know? Have a little bit of fun. All right, starting off today's episode with faith first, we're going to be talking about trials. Trials are something that's going to happen to you across your life, whether it be physical, spiritual, or a little bit of both. I wanted to open up today with kind of a little more formal definition of what is a trial. On the internet, Webster's Merriam, whatever you want to go to, a trial is defined by a few things, but the two that really stand out to me are a test of performance, qualities, or abilities / suitabilities of someone, something, or it is a formal trial, standing before a jury, standing before a judge, finding if this person is guilty or not guilty. I think both those definitions can be applied to kind of three main areas of our life: physical, spiritual, and both, where they both kind of oversee. Now, I will say this as a firm believer, as somebody who looks to Christ for everything. Everything physical I can relate to spiritual, and everything spiritual, of course, can be either a little bit physical or just go straight to God Himself. However, in a sense of wanting to simplify it, we can split these a little more physical, spiritual, and both. Some physical trials that come to mind when looking at this are things like grinding at work. You've got a bunch of due dates coming up that you don't know what's going on. A boss is putting faith in you that you can get this done. They're testing your abilities. They're testing your qualities of what makes you a good employee. Or athletics. We were both college athletes. A trial could be, hey, we're going to put you in a new situation. On the football field, we're going to put you in a new spot. How do you do? Wrestling mat, hey, you just had a really hard week of practice, of exams. Time for you to go perform on the mat, a hard weight cut. Now, getting to spiritual trials, that can be from God, or that can be from other beings, whether it be demonic, whether it just be, person to person. In these spiritual trials, things that really stand out to me are lust, greed, anger, pride, indulgence. But God could be testing your endurance. He could be testing how you do if He's not quite there right in your ear. There are some times where God feels distant, but I promise you, friends, God is never more than an arm's length away. He always has His hand over you. He always has His hand with you. And anytime you need Him, you call to Him, He will be there. But there are times where instead of being like a parent holding your hand through it, it might feel like that parent behind you, watching you walk and being behind you. But I promise you, friends, He's right there with you. But again, back to the spiritual almost spiritual warfare, as some theologians call it. I want to touch on verses 13 through 14 in James 1, and that says, "Let no one say, when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He Himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed." Two things on that. One, we can put ourselves into own spiritual trials. I heard a quote by Bryce Crawford, and I recommend checking him out. He's a great dude. But he said, and this has just been sticking with me since I heard it, sinning feels like freedom until you try to stop. And in that same way, a lot of our trials can be us putting ourselves in continually bad situations, causing us to step on our own mistakes. But it can also be the devil. It can also be other so-called friends, non-believers, putting you in those things. But things like lust, greed, anger, pride, those are not by God. And then lastly, in this last kind of trials, for both medical, financial, family, things like that, bigger situations. That's where both are tested. Your physical body is tested, and a medical diagnosis. Cancer diagnosis is a big one. That's testing your physical. It's also testing your spiritual, because God's asking, how much are you going to rely on me? How much are you going to come to me for your daily bread, for your daily manna? And how much are you going to try to grab this by yourself, like Abraham, like Isaac did when they went through Egypt, trying to take these things into their own hands? I want to touch quickly as well on the spiritual trials, the spiritual warfare. Job is a fantastic example. In the story of Job, which is one of the most well-known trials in the Bible, we see that that was started by the devil, upheld by the devil, but he was restored by God. And not to take too much away from what Addison's going to be talking about, but we could find joy in these trials, and these trials have purpose, have meaning. Last thing that I want to say before wrapping up my side about trials is found in verses 5 and 6 in James 1. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave from the sea driven and tossed by the wind. When you're asking God for things, he's going to hear you. And if you ask for patience, read James 1. If you ask for patience, God's not going to give you patience. He's going to give you ways to grow that patience. And that is what a trial is, and why it's so important.
Yeah, so trials can be a good thing. In the moment, they're tough, they're annoying, they're not something you want to deal with, but you could grow because of that. In James 1, verses 2 through 4, at the top it's labeled actually faith and endurance. So, dear brothers and sisters, when trouble of any kind comes your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Whenever I think of endurance or being tested, usually relate it to sports. That's how God honestly has spoken to me the most. Maybe not the most, but a lot when it comes to trials, because I've gone through trials in sports and I've learned from that, such as injuries in wrestling. Because I've had injuries in wrestling and wasn't satisfied with how my career went, he opened up other doors because he made me keep going. And also similar to just simple getting in shape and exercising. A lot of times, in order for us to get better, we got to work out hard and we got to get tired. We got to make our bodies weak and tired in order for us to get stronger. So that's my comparison to why trials can be a good thing, and because he tells us. And I'm not going to hit too much more now on the faith first and the trials, because I'm going to go ahead and head on to the what's going on segment of our podcast, because I'm talking about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's fairly similar to going through trials and having kind of the good part of trials. So moving on to the what's going on part, and me talking about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. The first part I want to hit is in Second Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. It says, all praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. God is our merciful Father and the source of all comfort. He comforts us in all of our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. For the more we suffer for Christ, the more God will shower us with his comfort through Christ. So, as we can see here, the being comfortable with being uncomfortable, our source comes from God. God gives us the comfort we need to get through those trials, to get through that uncomfortable stage. It should kind of take a weight off of us because of that. A lot of times when we go into trials, anxiety hits us. We start thinking, oh, we're in this by ourselves, but that's far from true. 1 Peter 5:7 says to cast all your cares and anxieties to him because he cares for you. And then here he's telling us he's going to be with us. And then in verse 5, it really sticks out to me. I want to repeat it. It says, for the more we suffer for Christ, the more God will shower us with his comfort through Christ. So it shows us here that he is going to strengthen us during this time of weakness. We talked about it in Harrison's podcast, how sometimes your weakness is a better gift than your strength because of the way God uses it. In those trials, God is going to use those trials and that part that makes you feel super weak to end up being your strength, allowing you to grow with him. So he is going to shower that onto you and grow you stronger, for that reason. And also another thing to comfort us in the uncomfortable. In Romans chapter 8, verse 18, it says, yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. One, I'm going to go to sports, and a lot of times you're going to hear me go to sports. That's the best way I can relate. That's where God has really talked to me and has helped me understand things. Is when we repeat the verse, it says, "Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory that He will reveal to us later." So there's a lot there, at least a lot going through my head. So in sports, we suffer in practice, we suffer doing the extra hard work, and that's to maybe get the victory, whether it's a championship of some sort, of whether it's conference, state, national championship, whatever that may be. But something I want to add to that is, so first we suffer and then we see the victory, but we might not see the victory similar in sports the way we want to see it, but it's the way God has given it to us. So all those hard times that I went to in wrestling in high school, I didn't get the accolades I wanted to get from that. So I was like, in that moment, I was like, there was no point in me doing any of that extra work. But in reality, what he revealed to me later, the glory he revealed to me later, wasn't in the accolades that I was looking at. Because I wasn't satisfied with what was going on in my sport at that time, it encouraged me to keep going and keep doing a sport that I didn't want to keep doing. And because of that, he revealed a different type of victory to me. He opened doors for me to meet other people. He opened doors for me to, well, it wasn't me leading FCA, it's God leading FCA through me, but he put me in a position to find him actually because of sports. So no, what I was looking for at that time was accolades that he wasn't going to give me, but he gave me something far greater because of that. So what I'm saying in here is we're going to go through trials and it's going to make us stronger. And there's going to be victory at the end of it. And sometimes it'll be the victory that you were looking for. So keep working towards that. But sometimes it's going to be a different victory that you didn't even see coming. And then as I was preparing for this podcast, I was going through my notes. And I remember talking about being comfortable with being uncomfortable in a past FCA lesson. And kind of what I'm about to talk about is for a more of a Bible study group or bigger groups. And something that we did, me and Harrison and Brett, is we got a box of cards, uh, just a regular deck of cards. And we brought it in the room. And a lot of times, let's say we had 40-ish people, 40, 50 people, or so people would split up in their own groups with certain friends. So in this case scenario, we were talking about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. So we handed out cards, and based off their number, like A's through four or whatever it may be, we mixed up the groups so people had to go with other people to talk about Christ. And for some people, that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable talking about something that you may not know a lot about to people you don't know. And but because that happened, we were able to see victory because those following weeks, because that happened, because God put that on our hearts, people built relationships who they didn't have a relationship prior to. And you saw groups growing, and because of that, you those relationships just grew and grew and grew, meaning Christ was getting more popular on campus because there was more talk about it with other people. And honestly, so on and so forth. Like, be okay in those trials. It's not comfortable, like I said. It's literally being comfortable with being uncomfortable. But understand during those trials that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that because of that trial, you will be stronger in the end.
Yeah, man, that's you're so right. There's so many times that it's easy to kind of get comfortable, being comfortable, and then you don't want to grow. I
Mm.
mean, talking about sports is very very easy in a sense of like if you stayed the same and everyone continues to get better, you're gonna fall behind very quickly. You're not gonna get to play.
Right.
And you talk about being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. You talked about like that deck of cards and whatnot. Following Christ is not easy. Nowhere does Christ ever say, "Follow me, and your life is going to be perfect." In fact, he tells you trials are
Right.
coming. He
Right.
tells you persecution's coming. Christ was literally a miracle worker, taking away the fact that he's our savior, and they crucified him. Like these things are going to come. But something that kind of came to me as you were talking is, in these trials, right? They happen for a reason, and being comfortable with talking to randoms is nice because it's two things. One, it builds your comfortability in Bible fluency, having those kinds of situations. But two, it also builds that relationship and trust with God. because now you're fully having to rely on God's Spirit speaking through you. I mean,
Yeah.
think about Paul in almost every letter he opens up with. He's like, yeah, I'm a servant of God. I don't do anything. And then I forget which book, and hopefully you can correct me. He specifically was like, when I first came to you guys, I wasn't using words of man because I'm so trash at speaking. God spoke to you
Yeah.
through me, and that's why you guys are saved. Like nothing I did.
So I'm glad you brought that up because um thinking listening to you talk I want to talk about Harrison real quick, and instead of doing it in the podcast pondering, I want to bring this up right now.
Mm-hmm.
That was why we feel that FCA was successful at Fairmont State was because him and I were not just speaking our knowledge. We didn't know a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go strictly off the Bible, and because of that, it allowed God to speak through us more, and it truly showed that it was Him working and not us
Yeah.
in that case scenario. It was uncomfortable because I was like, I don't know, but there were times when I started speaking, I was like, I didn't know what I was speaking beforehand, and it just proved that like he's going to talk through you and work things out with you, even in uncomfortable situations.
And your faith gets built in that, right? I mean, things that happen
It has
later,
to.
exactly. Like you build up these small bricks, and then all of a sudden, before you realize it, you're laying down full on stones in your faith with Him. Like those little things of
Right.
you guys speaking. Now something else happens down the road, like a little mishap, a little like a flat tire. You're maybe, I mean, flat tire in a spiritual sense. If I got a flat tire going anywhere, I'd be very upset. But in a spiritual sense, right? You're not as quite upset by it. You don't feel as defeated because you continually have these things to look back on, right?
Right.
I forget. I'm gonna mess it up, but I'm always been a person that actions speak louder than words. And if you tell me that I can trust you, I'm only going to trust you after you show me 1,000 ways that I can't trust you. And I feel the same goes with God. It is very easy to read scripture, at least for somebody like me, and be like, God says that He's love. God says that He's power. God says that He can give us rest, that He's all knowing. But there's been 1,000 times in my life, big, small, or indifferent, that He's been there for me. Why do I know I can trust Him? Because He met me when my mother had cancer, and He met me when I stubbed my toe. So He can meet me
Yeah.
anywhere, right?
And you can share that now in Second Corinthians chapter 1 verse 7. It says, we are confident that as you share in our sufferings, you will also share in the comfort God gives us.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, first off, how'd you get through the suffering? It was because of God, and you're able to share that with other people. Kind of what we're trying to do right now to other people. Like,
Yeah.
once again, that trial is going to bring so much more than what you can imagine. It's going to bring strength for you, but also other people if you explain the love Christ gave you through that trial.
Exactly. Or letting other people go through that trial with you. I mean, if you allow
Right.
others to walk with you, then you get to. I mean, as a bystander, not only do you get to see somebody like a friend. Say Addison, that you bring me through one of your trials, and you're in the absolute gutter, and I'm a non-believer. Look, Addison,
Mhm.
he keeps calling to God. I don't even know who he's talking to, and I watch how your life builds, and you always put Christ first. Okay, well, I have some trials in my life. I want that, and
Right.
you start building that, and then people are getting a faith of continued trials that you're allowing people in, whether they have a faith in God or not.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think at times actions can speak louder than words, and um, I think sometimes your actions can be someone's first Bible, and especially in trials, if you can act in a way that Christ has called us to in those trials to other people, and they see it, and you are standing out, um, then yeah, that's what helps.
Yeah.
Like I asked a person at church, what it keeps saying in the Bible that uh, I believe it was Joseph was a righteous man. I said, what does that mean? And he says that means like to stand alone. And
Mm.
I think for us, in order to become righteous and through those trials, we need to stand alone. We need to kind of be out there but in our faith,
Yeah, and again, I don't want to.
not in a pride
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, but I don't want to call too much to like what Harrison spoke about, but we did talk about that, like how Christ calls people to be alone. He talked to Moses when he was alone. He talked to Abraham when he was alone. He talked to so many people, and even in our lives, there's sometimes where like he might be tearing down relationships that you have to get you alone, to prepare you for a
Right.
coming trial. So I wanted to talk about in my what's going on. you know, whether I meant to plan this or not, or whether God was just kind of providing perfect timing, talking about trials, trying to set this up tonight. I want to talk about joy in everything, whether it be personal trials, whether it be seeing how God's working in the world. Um, I just want to talk about joy. There's so much of life that can be, my life is going wrong. This is how I'm going to fix it. I'm fixing something that's wrong in my life. I have this huge thing coming up, and life can weigh on you, but we don't. I feel like we don't get to talk about joy enough, and I think a lot of that is coming today. So I go to Storyline Church in Arvada. If anybody's watching this in Arvada, Colorado, check out Storyline. I love the church. It is a Bible based church. It does a lot of teaching, and you can feel the Spirit moving. And in our church, I've been able to be a part of a few things. We as in my family and some friends and I started going, I want to say about April of 2021. And I don't want to get this wrong. So as a disclaimer, I'm going to throw out some numbers that are fairly accurate, but might not be dead on. When I first started going in April of 21, obviously post COVID, there was probably between 400 and 600 people that went. And I could be slightly wrong on the number, but it doesn't feel very wrong. About 400 to 600 people. I think we're closing in on almost 4,000 members now. And that is a huge growth. And the actual number itself is amazing, but we've had to move from one service to two services to now we go to three services, an 8 o'clock, a 9:30, and an 11. And every year around this time, today is June 29th, so that towards the end of June, we do something called One Sunday, where all services come together. We go outside, we get to worship, we get to praise together, and we get to watch a lot of baptisms. We do baptisms about once a month. And there's something that I've been praying for a little bit. I saw it at another church I went to once, and I really, really liked it, of during baptism Sundays, opening the invitation to anybody. And I want to say they had about 40 planned baptisms today, which that in itself is an absolute miracle. Like, praise the Lord. I'm not kidding. We probably had between 50 and 60 total baptisms today. Getting to watch that, getting to be a part of somebody's story like that is amazing. It is great seeing personal growth, looking back a year ago and saying, look where God has brought me to. But it's so much better, and I know, Addison, you might be able to speak on this here in a sec, how good it feels in something like FCA, in something like Salco, in football, in athletics across the world, getting to see how God is working and getting to see the fruits of whether it be your labor or somebody else's labor or just, frankly, only God's labor. And that's awesome. Dude, today was amazing. I had so much fun. I'm a little burned, if you can't tell, from sitting out in the Colorado sun, but that's just the church. I get to be a part of a Saltco church, which Saltco is starting to become a little more nationwide, that deals with college students and is a great college ministry. I got to be a leader for a year of it, but I want to say ours started officially about 2 years ago, and I could be wrong semesters-wise. I want to say it was spring semester of 24 was our first official year. So fall of 23 would have been our unofficial, like, started college ministry. We were at 80 in fall of 23. 80 college students. This past spring semester, we opened up with, I think, 500 students. That's insane. And getting to watch that in only a few semesters is amazing. I think I mentioned it when we on the Chris podcast, Chris U, when I started at Mines, our football team and our chaplain would pray with us before a game. We probably only had about 20 to 40 kids that would come out, depending on the day, before a game that would come pray with us. On a 120-man roster, that's still phenomenal. This past season, in 2024, we probably only had about 20 kids stay in. And that's nothing against those who stay in. God gave us free will. But seeing a circle so large that we're shoulder to shoulder in shoulder pads and the people on the ends can barely hear the prayer because there's so many people out there. Getting to see God move is amazing. Getting to hear about Addison and how God's using him in FCA. Getting our other friend Austin, him watching him convert his life to Christ after knowing him for a long time. His brother Aiden, getting to see friends around me kind of like start dipping their toe into faith and then just getting engulfed by it. It is so much fun. I'm along the lines of Harrison. I have a very boring testimony. So I don't get to say I was in the absolute depth. God pulled me out. I have my fair share of problems, and I can give my full testimony on another show. But getting to see somebody my age have a childlike faith when it's hard to still be a child is amazing. And the last thing I want to touch on, because I did talk about Job a little bit in Faith First. Um, Man, with God, there's a million things you get with God. With three that are really standing out to me, especially tonight since we're talking a lot about trials, is you get to find three R's: rest, recovery, and restoration. Rest, God calls any who are weary, come to me and you will find rest. Recovery, God tells us trials are coming. You're either in a trial or a trial is coming. And when you're preparing for a trial, find that recovery. Go to God. Start building your foundation in times where you're not getting tested. And then restoration. The same way that God restored Job, anything that he takes away from you, he's going to restore tenfold. And that dude, that's just I can't say enough. Like over the past few months, getting to actually be a part of God's work and getting to watch that wind blow in front of me has brought so much joy, and it allows me to keep a childlike faith, even though I've been following him for 23 years.
Yeah. Something I want to hit on first is the way you're talking about joy. I want to explain that there's a difference in joy and happiness. And I could kind of get this wrong, but happiness starts with HAPP. It's also what happens to you. So happiness is based off what happens to you. Joyfulness, it's like the internal happiness, like the internal joy. And Job's a great example of it. Yeah, he went through trials. He wasn't always joyful or happy about it, but he was able to trust in the Lord because of the internal joy, if that makes sense what I'm saying. I kind of mumble my words there, but um just the difference between joy and happiness. And I feel like the first part of really being joyful is being thankful, realizing what you have and what God has blessed you with. And you're really hitting on that, especially talking about your church going expanding those numbers and you just talking about being outside. And you might not have said the word thankful, but the way it sounded was how thankful you were that the three or so services were able to just be together and worship him. And talking about the joy that comes from the numbers growing, meaning the number of people growing, whether it's in church or life groups of some sorts, but also seeing people's hearts grow. I think a lot of that comes from the fact of sports are eventually going to end, school's going to end, even jobs are going to end, but the Lord never ends. So it's almost like when you're either teaching it or part of something, it's like, oh, I'm part of something that's going to have a purpose for eternity. And there's just a difference in that. Because I love whenever I'm coaching kids in wrestling when they grow in their sport and all that, but there's way more joy when I get to see someone's heart grow for something that's going to be for eternity and for something that's going to have a purpose for life.
Yeah.
And you mentioned boring testimonies. I somewhat have a boring testimony too, but um sometimes boring testimonies are also the best testimonies, and that's not to compare, but that's just per person.
Mm,
I mean, it shows that you had good parents. It shows that you had a great family. Like there's nothing boring about having a great family that brought you up in that brought
yeah.
you up in Christ. And you definitely can't call yours completely boring because we've talked about it. You've gotten off the path before. So in that way, you're able to relate to other people whenever it comes to the fact that, hey, I'm in Christ. Why do I feel like I want to do this? Why do I want to sin more? Or whatever, you have an example because of your in quotation boring testimony. So those are a couple of points I want to hit, but I kind of want to see if you have any comments off of kind of like first steps of being joyful is first off being thankful. Do you have any comments kind of off that?
I mean, a few. Like we just talked about in Faith First, and you're part of what's going on about why trials are important. Trials produce growth. There is no way around it. The only way to grow is to build. Something I was thinking of, an analogy that I came up with was, when it comes to remodeling a kitchen, a bedroom, rearranging your room, redoing your closet, whatever it may be, sometimes the best part of it is the demolition. Getting to just take a sledgehammer to everything, axing parts of your old life. Why don't we appreciate that in our own lives when God is breaking us down? There's a certain
Getting rid of
pride. Yeah,
getting rid of the old and
exactly.
bringing in the new kind of.
And there should be joy in that. Like in the same way that you get to look at when you have this great as a designer, and I am not a designer, I'm an engineer, so there's part of that planning that I do enjoy. But think about this: put yourself in God's shoes without being a heretic. um,
That what?
Without being a heretic.
Okay.
But if you're a designer for a kitchen, a closet, anything, you have this perfect design in your head, and you have got to make that room, that space, dirty first, and then you get to watch the pieces fall in. That's what God's
Yeah.
doing to us. And too much we're like, God,
That,
what are you doing? Why you this is so good. This works. And he's like, no. I have a better plan. We're gonna break this side of you down. We're gonna rearrange this. We're gonna move your bed over here, over to this wall. And then once you look back at it, and especially like again, putting yourself back in those shoes, you look back and like, look what I've done. Like this is so much better. And it even says that in Genesis, like God took a step back on that seventh day and was like, he saw everything that he did. He said it was good. And that's what he's trying to do with us, but we want
yeah.
to just
Yeah.
hold on to what we have.
Yeah. Your analogy opened my eyes to a little bit, and I'm not gonna say this for everyone, but I'm gonna say it's at least for 99% of the people. The part about the demolition, it might be the favorite part, but it's the ugliest part, and the and a lot of people are worried about what other people are seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I know I am.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain trials that I've gone through that I've actually internally enjoyed in a sense because I saw the light at the end of the tunnel kind of deal. But the parts that got me was what is this person thinking of me? And I have successful family members in a good way, just in life, successful because they have a good family, successful in many different ways. And maybe in a trial, I don't feel like I'm successful, but I know I see the light at the end of the tunnel. When I'm around certain people, they're not even doing anything, they're doing everything right. But I'm so worried about what they're thinking of me, even though they're probably not thinking anything, that I hate the demolition sometimes. And I think if we can censor out of what other people think, it also shows who we want to be around,
Yeah.
right? Like if people see your demolition and are judging you for it, then they might not be people you want around, that you want to be yoked with.
Yeah.
But the people that see that demolition and see the work that you're putting, that's getting put into it, those are the people you want around. So I think a lot of it, and I am just as guilty as it, if not more than a lot of people. I'm so worried about what other people think of me when in reality, it doesn't matter. I went through a year of trial, worried about people judging me because of certain job situations, but it doesn't matter. Like, enjoy the trial with God, knowing there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And also during that trial, you'll realize who you want to keep around.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to say on that, talking about people that you may be around, your spiritual circle, your friendships. If somebody is doing a bigger demolition than you at the time, that doesn't mean they're a worse person than you. That means that they're on the kitchen and you're working on the closet. Those days are coming for everybody. Whether you
Okay.
have a boring testimony, whether you have an exciting testimony, or whether you have one in the middle, there is something in your life that you're going to want to hold on to so hard that it's going to feel like you're completely redoing the foundation of your house. But it is so worth it.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I understand what Josh is saying. No one has a boring testimony. I used to say the same thing.
Yeah.
If you are with God, there is no boring testimony. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And help each other. If you see someone else in a demolition stage, why not rebuild with them?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now we're gonna get back into podcast pondering. We did it last week, and I know we said we're not gonna do it every week, so don't expect this to be a weekly thing. But man, it is so good to just spend, at least for me, in this last week since we've spoken with him, picking on things that he's talked about and applying them to my own life, taking it like a little bit of a reflection time for myself. Two things that are really, really standing out to me that have just been clicking in my head. And again, before Addison and I get into any of this, we encourage you go watch the episode. It's a little bit of a longer episode. We do understand that, but man, is it rich in God being with us. I truly felt His presence. But as somebody who enjoys being outside as well, but as somebody who enjoys being outside as well, being in nature, a little bit of a yapper. I don't know if you guys have picked up about that, but Harrison talking about most of conversations being nonverbal and communications being nonverbal, finding God in nature, in the trees, in the animals, in the grand design, and how other people interact, and how other animals interact, plants, clouds, all of that, finding God in everything. And I know it's biblical, and the verse isn't coming to me at the top of my head, but find God in everything because He is in everything. He is the grand designer. And then the last thing that's just been picking at my head, and I genuinely want to start doing it in my own reading, is being in three places of the Bible, being in the Old Testament, learning about God's law, being in the New Testament, being in Paul's letters, or anything like Galatians or Revelations, and then being in a gospel. Being in the Old Testament allows you to build that foundation, so when you get to stories of the New Testament, you kind of know a little better what's going on. Being in the New Testament, those letters of Paul, the churches that Paul writes to, those sins are still happening today. They might be happening in your life. There's nothing new under the sun. They're just in a different wrapping. And then lastly, being in a gospel, the way he described it was so beautiful. And I don't want to take his fire away from him. But if you're going to follow Christ and be called to live like Christ, we need to know how he responded to things. And that was just eye opening.
Yeah. Um, Harrison, one of my closest friends, he and I'm gonna repeat this. I mean, he helped me in my faith. He was the definition of iron sharpens iron, being around him. So a lot of what Harrison talked about was how weaknesses can sometimes be better than your strengths, more of a gift than your strengths. And that's because he used the example of public speaking. If you only heard him talk about the Bible, he is the greatest public speaker you will ever listen to. Now, actually, I haven't heard him public speak outside of that, so I don't know if he is actually bad, but according to him, he hates public speaking. But since that is a weakness of his, that allows God to work through him even more instead of him using his own strength. It shows, honestly, the realness of who God is, being able to use something that doesn't seem right in this world, making it work. And that's what God does. He uses our weaknesses to show him off, show God off in the right way, to present himself in front of other people. And that's kind of what Harrison talked about. So I encourage you to watch the rest of that and um, just not hitting exactly on what the podcast is, but telling a little bit more about who Harrison is he's taught me a lot of those lessons of using weaknesses, allowing God to use your weaknesses. And that goes for insecurities as well. There's certain things I was insecure about that I was like, dude, I'm praying about this. Why do you think I'm insecure about this, and this? And he once again, he doesn't even just speak from himself. He goes to the Bible and he'll give me things in the Bible as to why. And so yeah, that's just the person who he is. And I encourage you to go watch that to learn a little bit more about how God can use your weaknesses and your strength, but especially your weaknesses. All right, heading to the did you know? My fact is going to be boring to some people. To other people, they might like it. I'm going to speak on a fact about WWE, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to a show tomorrow, so I'm in the mood. I
Mm,
want to talk about it, but they were just recently, they did one show in Saudi Arabia. And for those who don't know, Saudi Arabia is a fairly, what I'm going to call a rich country. They carry, I believe, I could get this wrong, 1/5 of all the oil in the world is in
probably
Saudi.
not wrong.
Yeah, so something around there. So for one show lasts about 3 hours. Saudi Arabia pays WWE $50 million to come and do a show there.
50 million?
50 million, and I don't think that's including like ticket sales and stuff. Like I think that's simply to bring WWE there and bring people, I don't know if I'm not gonna say around the world, but yeah, kind of around the world to Saudi Arabia to like spend the week slash weekend for one show. There might have been some other shows that weren't televised and there's some other meet and greets, but yeah, $50 million to bring in a bunch of athletes
Yeah,
to perform a
that's
show. It,
so they're not like usually for like the UFC for example, they're paying money to go to these certain venues. Like they Saudi Arabia is actually paying them.
yeah, so
Dang.
that's I think that's more common on the business side. The way I'm thinking is it been so like if you think of America and like if you were to bring a big show to like a small town like West Virginia, it can help West Virginia's economy a ton.
Yeah, yeah.
So similar to other cities, even on a bigger scale, you bringing something that big, and wrestling must be big in Saudi Arabia. I don't know what sports are like there because I know WWE is not exactly a sport, but like
Well,
to some people it is. I mean, it can be. I like
some
it. Don't care.
athletes though.
They are some
They
athletes.
are some athletes.
So I think in that way they just help their economy and they'll pay 50 million and they must get it back somehow.
They have to get it back somehow. I mean that.
They have to get it back somehow else I wouldn't be paying
Yeah,
50 million.
I don't want to comment on a country I
Me
haven't been
personally.
to, that I haven't researched, but I do know that the top earners of that country are insane. I have heard
Yeah,
whispers that
I think them.
their top richest people make our top richest people look like
I
millionaires
didn't know
again.
that. My dad's the one that said that they're big in the oil industry and that country is considered like a rich country. I actually
Oh
didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. Like
No,
the
that's my did you know fact.
yeah. I mean that's no. That I will say I do want to disclaim this. Neither of us are geopoliticians. We don't know what's going on. But I
We're
will
working
say
on it.
this: I do know that the wage gap is, or wage disparity, I should say, is huge because like you look at Dubai, stinking rich, filthy rich, and then but I also do know I think just outside of the city or something like that, they do have a lot of problems. But I can tell you that they run a huge majority of the world's oil. So that's a crazy fact though. 50 million. Anybody want to give me 50 million?
If you could put on a show,
What we're doing right now?
there you go. Yeah, 50 million for this
Yeah,
podcast.
let's go to a Muslim country and go put on a Christian show.
There
All
you
right.
go.
My fact, not really a fact, but my did you know is did you know when somebody says no offense, usually means they're about to say something hyper offensive.
Yeah, no offense, that was a terrible fact. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm
Wow.
just kidding. I had to do it. I had to do it. I had to go. No, I'm joking. That's actually very true though.
It is because like think about how many. I mean, I will throw myself under the bus here. I say it all the time. Be like, dude,
I do
no
too.
offense, but you're kind of getting a little fat. No, I won't say something like that. But there are times like you say no offense and you're trying to like just like genuinely try to help them, and then you say it out loud, and then like, at least for me, I'll be like, wow, I would really not like it if somebody told me
Well,
that.
it's a way to tell the truth and be a good friend. Well, sometimes be a good
Well,
friend, but lighten the blow a little bit. Lighten the blow a little bit. Why was that hard to
keeping
say?
it.
Okay, you got to keep that in. I don't know. I mumbled that. I
Yeah,
mumbled that. Holy crap.
yeah. No offense,
No,
dude,
that
but you really need to work on your talking.
I do. I really do. Yeah, 50 million would help with that.
50 million would help with that. Again,
I could get
sponsors,
like a
if
communication
you wanna
source.
reach out to
What's
us,
that?
sponsors,
Yeah,
anybody,
sponsor. Yeah, oil companies. Anybody. Uncrustables.
Uncrustables,
All right.
food. All right.
Well,
Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Found the Flock, another talk show with Addison and I. I know we look forward to this every week, getting to do this, getting to spread God's message. So thank you so much for watching.
yeah. Again, this has been really fun. So thank you for watching. Speaking of thankfulness, comment something you're thankful for below. And if you want more of this, follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all found in the flock. And God willing, we're posting every Tuesday and Friday on YouTube. So thank you.